I just want to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Very excited here. We have an excellent panel set up for you today. We are missing one of our panelists who lost her voice. She's sitting in the audience, if she's able to chime in or not, but Kelly Gunn with Mead Tractor. But I'll first get started introducing myself. So I am Emily Spalla with Satisfied. For those of you who may not know us or may recognize us as the survey people, but we have been working with John Deere dealers and other dealers across brands, but helping them focus on customer experience and measuring employee engagement as well as online reputations. And so we've had the pleasure of working with John Deere dealers since 1998, almost 25 years now. And then I'll quickly go through and introduce each one of our panelists before we get started. So to my left, I have Farah Eibachbauer, I'm saying that correctly, and she's the Human Resource Manager at Heritage Tractor. For those of you who are familiar with Heritage Tractor, they are a 21 location Deere dealership with almost 600 employees now, operating out of Kansas, Missouri, and Arkansas. And she joined the company back in 2020, bringing forward almost 25 years of experience in HR. And then next to her, we have Tracy with Premier Equipment, and they are an 8-location dealership out of Ontario. And Tracy, you've been there now for what, 10 years, I think?
Just 10, yeah.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
And then to her left, we have Ann Palm of 21st Century. 21st Century is a 16-location dealership out of Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, with around 400 employees. Is that right? Yeah. And Ann recently has joined the family business, but has brought forth a wealth of HR experience, I think over, about 20 years now.
And some,
so.
but
okay, sure. We'll keep it youthful in here. That's great. Good. So we're just going to run today like a conversation, just having some questions. We want to bring forth some real life examples. Employee retention, we know, is a really big challenge that's facing everyone. It's something specifically to this industry with service technicians for many years, and now it seems like all positions. And so our goal really here is to give you at least one or two things that you can walk away with that you can take back to your dealerships to implement from the examples that these women were so kindly enough to share with each one of you today. So I guess just to get started, when we talk about employee engagement, one of the key pieces is making sure that employees are feeling appreciated, right? That they feel valued. What are some of the things that you have done at your dealerships or strategies that you've put in place to ensure that they feel appreciated and valued? And any one of you, I don't know, Tracy, if there's anything that you've done at Premier.
Yeah, there's a few things we have. We continually, think retention's an issue, right? So how can we help our employees feel that appreciation? I think one of the things that we specifically work with Satisfied on is we do a leadership assessment. It's kind of our leaders' performance review. So it's separate from the regular review process. And the thing that I think what we get out of those is all of the direct reports, kind of like a 360, but we don't do the peer piece. So the direct reports get an opportunity to speak into their leader and how they feel the past year went. And from that, they have an opportunity to include comments. And from those comments, we can pull out some ways where, they say, thanks for what you've done with this, or, you need to improve on that. And we can gather from those where they have felt that appreciation. Some of it's little, some of it's just, hey, great job. For everybody feels that appreciation a little differently. So it's learning, working with the leaders to say get to know your team and know how they want to be appreciated. Some of them want a big to do a big announcement, a big team announcement to say, hey, Farah, look what Farrah did, everybody, that type of thing, and some don't. So it's really kind of tuning into those employees and figuring out what it is that makes them tick and what makes them feel appreciated. We do simple things. I'm sure many of you do, like service awards. So we used to give out gift cards and all that kind of stuff. We just give them cash. So, and that's a hit. So we write them a check, it's a check. But we have, you know, if somebody reaches a milestone, they get a check. And then at their Christmas luncheon, they are recognized again, and we give them a little Premier Equipment pen. And that's an opportunity to say, hey, like, thanks for what you've done this year, and thanks for your years of service that you've given to us. So it's little things like that. We usually do a big Christmas party where it's a dinner and a dance, and you can bring your guest. And I know those have kind of gone away a little bit, but we've really enjoyed those. And we have our CEOs and our leadership team stand at the front of the doors as people walk in and shake their hands and say, Merry Christmas, and, you know, thanks for all you do. And I heard from a specific employee this year that they were just blown away that our CEO took the time and came up to them and said, thank you, right from the CEO level. So it's little things that I think what I've realized is that it doesn't take much and it's not a lot of work, but it's the effort, right? So that kind of thing. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. And sometimes it is just the little things. And the other thing you pointed out too, I think, is that there's different things that make employees tick, right? Exactly. And so I think we heard that yesterday in our class that we taught from Doug Tibbin at Pattison about understanding what it is that motivates people.
Exactly.
And making sure we're, you know, giving them kind of what they need and how they want to be motivated, and that recognition in those ways. That's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
One thing that I don't know if I'm loud enough. One thing that we've realized too, it is the small things. And we just had our 25th anniversary as Heritage Tractor, and we did big events at each of the locations, and we invited their family. And that was huge, right? You know, we just all kind of went through COVID and kind of we're all in our own little bubbles there for a couple years, and getting everybody back together and seeing their kiddos and meeting their significant others, that really went a long ways. Having those events and giving them food and having activities and spending a couple hours as a family really went a long way.
I think that's great. So one other thing to talk about too, I think we hear often, and we see this a lot from feedback from dealership staff, is this work-life balance as we know it or hear it. I think this is something that's changed a lot too in recent years, especially coming out of COVID, as you mentioned. What have you done at your dealerships, maybe things that worked, didn't work, that you've done to try and create some balance between work and life, personal life?
I think this is a huge problem, opportunity. A huge opportunity for us. And I think it's something that goes right along with being in the agricultural industry, of which I'm new and I'm still learning a lot about it, but understanding the seasonality of it. You can't get away from the seasonality, right? So you know that there are going to be particularly busy times of the year. You can't get away from Saturdays because when the farmer needs stuff fixed, he needs we got to be there. So there are some things that we've been working around. I mean, we're trying to market our culture as being one where, come to Western Nebraska, where people are like, Western Nebraska. But it's like, yeah, you come here, you work, but we also, give you have time to go off and hunt and fish and do all of the things that you like to do outside of that. But we're also in the middle of doing a bunch of listening sessions. So the COO and I and the aftermarket manager, we're all going out. We're talking to employees, we're talking to technicians in particular, but also after the parts people as well, and talking to them about that exact thing. Like, work-life balance came up on our employee engagement survey. What does work-life balance mean to you? What are you looking for? Does a 4-day work week appeal to you? What does that look like? And so really talking about, we've done a restructure, so we aren't just necessarily one location. We've restructured so we've got a trio of stores that actually make up a region. And so, is there a way that we could maybe offload some of those on-call hours onto, kind of triage them through the 3 stores as opposed to everybody having an on-call person. So we're really open to listening to what employees have to say, their ideas about what does it mean, what does it look like, and can we accommodate them in the way that they want to be accommodated.
I was just gonna add, I know for what I believe anyways, is that it starts at the top. And that example of what that looks like, I can remember I was day 2 on the job, and I sent a text to my boss, who I reported to the CEO, and it was an evening text, and he replied to me and he said, "You have young kids." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, it's 8 o'clock at night. Like, we'll talk about this tomorrow." And I was blown away by that. I was like, okay. And he set the tone right then and there of how this was going to go. Like you said, there's seasons that you have to, be on when you need to be on, or off when you need to be off. But that was big for me. And that's something that I think has built our culture, is that, family is important. And that time away from here, yeah, this is important. We all love what we do, but the time away from here is just as, or even more important.
Did you have something? I think you wanted to add. Yeah.
We implemented flex schedules. So we have some technicians at 2 of our locations that piloted 410s. And then we also offered 4 9s and a 4 to try to accommodate some of that, work-life balance. It has taken off. I really thought the 410s would take off a lot more than what it did. But it takes that foundation and that strong management team to really make that work with the technicians. So we've only got a couple locations doing the 410s, but we do have a lot of our locations that are doing 4 9s and a 4 based on the seasonality, as you mentioned. And then just, really providing that flexibility to our employees if they need to head out for a kiddo's event, those types of things, doctor's appointments, just really caring about your employees and making sure they know that, hey, you're not going to have to miss, a critical event. So I think that's important that you communicate that out to your staff and to your management team, that truly give them that flexibility. And they'll stay with you. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think a lot of the things that you've mentioned all seem to kind of align back to the company culture, right? Like Tracy mentioned, starting at the top and sort of setting that tone. As we think about that, what have you done to ensure that employees keep things in alignment, I guess, with the employees and the company culture and values? That's a big part of it, is that the values and ethics piece. At the dealership.
Want me to go?
Anyone, yeah.
Since I'm holding this hot potato.
Yeah. So I think, I'm sure like many of you, we have a purpose statement, we have convictions, we have what we call a BHAG, which is a big, hairy, audacious goal. And we hammer that into our employees nicely. It sounded bad.
HR appropriate.
HR appropriate, of course. But that starts right from the interview. Our interview guide is tweaked to have those questions worked in there on our convictions and our BHAG and our purpose statement. And every meeting that we have, we read that, even at the executive level. It goes up on the screen, and each of us goes around and we read a slide or a bullet point. And that goes right all the way down through the store. And I really find that has built a foundation for us and has really helped build our culture. When we do new hire orientation, we spend a whole day with our new hires, and that's the theme throughout the whole day, is that BHAG, our purpose and our convictions. And that's, we practice what we preach, if you will. We believe that this is stuff that we believe in as an organization, and what we would hope our employees also join our team because they believe it as well.
So we are really big into feedback. So one of the things that, our mission or our goals not a BHAG, but just our regular goal, is just to make farmers' lives easier. And so we actually went out and we had a company to go out and interview some of the farmers that were coming into our locations, and separated them out into categories of, John Deere loyalists, those that are there just because they need a part and we happen to be open, and those that occasionally are kind of agnostic around brand. And the feedback and the feedback that we garnered from that was really held against the statement of, are we making our customers' lives easier? And then we are now bringing all of that back into the locations and talking about, here's what our customers are saying about us. This is not in alignment, and what can we be doing to make sure that we actually are showing, not telling.
Anything you want to add?
Go ahead.
Okay, all right.
We got lots of questions,
We do. We've got a lot of great things to talk about today. So the other part of this is training is I think a really key component, something that dealers invest a lot of money and time in. And as we talk about retention of these employees, and as we have turnover, we have to go back and invest a lot of money back into the onboarding process. Recruiting right now itself is expensive, and then onboarding and training. What are you doing to ensure that they're getting adequate training and the right type of training? Is there anything that you're doing, to measure that as you look at the investment you're making there?
Passing the
It is a hot potato.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Training was something from our satisfied surveys that always showed up. And on our exit surveys, I'm sure all of you guys have the same feedback. Training was huge, and it was a mark that we were missing. And so we invested in actually hiring a training coordinator, which has been phenomenal. We also invested in actually purchasing an LMS system. So we are still in the very early stages of implementing that LMS, and we rolled it out on a phased approach with our management team first, and then it went out to all employees a couple months later. Had the management team go through some training and get acclimated with the LMS system, so then they could be a resource for their employees. But really driving a lot of information through our LMS, we have the opportunity from an HR perspective to do some of our own internal videos, and then we put those out there as well. Encourage people to take that training and have that assigned, whether that's through the training coordinator or the manager can assign that training as well. So lots of training focus for us in 23.
Yeah, same here. We recognized it to be a really big gap. Hearing from our exit interviews, that was found especially with parts. It seemed like the technicians had a little more structure, and we had a handle a little bit better on the sales piece, but parts was really hurting for training, and so we're in the process, very much similar to what you've just been through. We're coming up the same way. We're hiring a designated training position, and then we'll be researching LMS systems and all that kind of stuff too.
Ditto. Yeah. It's a big
So
one.
a real common theme there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big investment and something you're doing continually.
Yeah.
Okay. Leadership. So we talk about, you mentioned a little bit about leadership assessment and reviewing that, but from a growth opportunity, like the opportunities for new hires throughout like their tenure with the organization, we see sometimes in results that engagement tends to drop down, in that, like after the first couple years. And a lot of times we look into it, we see that they don't feel like there's a lot of room for growth or opportunities in the dealership. What have you done, if anything, to sort of create a leadership development program or provide opportunities for the employees to know that, there is a future to continue working at the dealership? Anything that you want to share, examples there?
We did another engagement feedback, right, that we received. So we did implement a leadership development program. We are in the very early stages. We just had our first group that graduated through that program and made sure that we communicated that out to all of our employees that, this select group of people we're going through that and giving people the opportunity to know that our plan was to continue rolling out new classes or new groups each year, so then they could have the opportunity to be a part of that as well, to get some growth.
Sure. So we also have a leadership development program. It's probably, I think we're on our 4th or 5th wave at this point. But it's actually was the brainchild of the CEO, and he kicks it off and is present in most of the sessions that they have. He and I, we kind of went around and around because I'm like, well, this isn't really a management 101 class. And he's like, no, it's a leadership class because I want them to understand every part of the organization. And so there's a section on finance, there's a section on accounting, there's a section on parts, there's a section on service. So that once they come out of there, they really have the fundamentals of what it takes to run a dealership, or what it takes, to run a dealership. And so it gives them that background knowledge, and then we're going to backfill that with our new training position with some true management classes. We also brought in Bruce Tulgan, who I believe he was associated with Deere a couple years ago, or I think Deere has used him. And he has his book is called It's Okay to Manage, I believe. It's okay to manage your people. And we've gone through a year-long training for all of our managers in that curriculum to teach them really about it is okay to have one-on-one. In fact, now it's our expectation that you have one-on-ones with all of your employees. It's okay to address performance. It's okay to have expectations and document and all of those things that I think was missing. You try and have that shared as tribal knowledge, but it doesn't always make the translation. So having that curriculum to really lay that out for leaders is good. And then I think we have a really strong policy of promoting from within, so people can see that there is growth opportunities within the organization, that we don't just go outside and find talent, bring it in. We're looking to grow from it within.
Those are all fantastic. Tracy, okay.
Yeah, very similar. We call it PLU. It's our Premier Leadership University. But it's been just sort of scratching the surface, if you will. Like, we teach our managers how to read a budget, that type of, like a little, like you said, a finance, a lot of HR courses, on performance management, how to have an effective performance review. We lay out leadership training plans when a new leader comes in. Whether they're internal or external, but we're looking to deep dive into more of that to make it almost like if you will, like a certification type of, like you mentioned, a grad class type of thing, right? Where you come through the program and off you go with your certificate or whatever that might look like. So.
Good. And like a show of hands in the room, is that something that everyone has currently going out their dealerships? A leadership development program? Okay, so a fair amount. Any lessons learned as you've implemented this? I know you're in your first year and you've been doing this for a few years longer, but bumps along the way or things you would have done differently looking back now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I think I grew up. I started my career as a corporate trainer and transitioned into an HR role. And the thing that bothered me back then is still a problem today, and that's that you provide the training, everybody gets a shiny new tool or shiny new binder, and they all look at and they're sitting in class and they're like, this is the greatest information I've ever heard in my entire life, and I'm going to change the world. And then they get back to the desk and there's a stack of the list of emails and the stack of phone messages or what have you, is people lined up outside, and they just go back to doing things the way they always did. The binder ends up in a drawer somewhere. And so what I'm really trying to focus on for this year is, we just invested a year of training with this Tulgan training. Now we're going to talk about application. How do you actually take it and put it into play? Because going through the training didn't do you any good if you don't actually make changes to the way you behave or how you lead.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And so is that something you just got integrated then throughout, that those employees that have graduated from that will have opportunities to sort of apply those skills in their current positions?
Yeah, and it'll be every time, when they come to us and say, well, this person isn't performing, it's okay, well, let's talk about how you were supposed to have those conversations. And did you have those conversations? Did you document anything? Okay, clearly, we've got some processes to work on in that regard, but it is really using it as a coaching opportunity to go back to our newer leaders and some of our more experienced ones, that for that matter, and to help them understand that these processes are important and really play a key role in helping employees understand what their role is in the organization and how they can be effective.
I think that's fantastic. So a lot of this all boils down to communication. I think we hear a lot about, feeling well informed about what's going on in the organization. Sometimes there's that disconnect between management or leadership and employees. What have you done or that's worked? Maybe what have you done that hasn't worked to try and keep people well informed throughout the dealership?
I think it's very simple. We have our exec team meetings, and typically from those meetings, which is the senior leadership team, it funnels down in a very simple way. That information goes down. But one of the things that, as I say, it's in my head, it's simple. One of the things we've done to communicate at that level with the employees, because we felt there was a little bit of a disconnect with, if you were my boss, you and I may have a great relationship, but, the senior leadership team who is not in the store, the location every single day, we created a little shared folder that exists on a shared drive, and whenever there was some good news or some sad news or something to share, it got plopped into that folder. And if a leader had to go out to visit a location, they would go into that folder. It was separated by location and go, oh, okay, I see that so-and-so had a baby. I'm gonna make sure I go up there and say, hey, congrats on your baby, right? That kind of thing. And that employee would be like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And it just it was a touch point, if you will, that those leaders could go and connect with them somehow. And I know that feels like, well, how does that build communication? But 9 times out of 10, there's a conversation that comes out of that. And it might be personal, or it might, usually it's us, oh, yeah, see, you're working on XYZ unit here, how's that going? And yeah, this customer's been such a pain. And then it just kind of opens up a whole lot of doors to talk. And it's been kind of cool. I know I use it myself whenever I have to go out, I make sure I take a quick peek in there. Our payroll benefits specialist, she gets a lot of, she sees our tracking forms, our absence tracking forms, so she'll know someone submitted a bereavement form, right? And she'll make sure that goes in there, and then we know, okay, they've lost somebody, right? And it's just a, hey, I'm really sorry to hear about that, whatever that might look like. So we do those sorts of simple little things.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too, because more from the other direction too. A lot of times I think people feel like maybe, the service technician or parts doesn't feel connected to leadership, but I think that's a great way to look at it, from making sure leadership's connected to what's going on in their lives. And it kind of touches back on the question we talked about at the very beginning about feeling appreciated and valued. Exactly. So it allows them to sort of connect that way. It's a good example.
Yeah. I was just going to, one of the other opportunities we have is that the senior leadership team is really good at talking amongst themselves. And that simple, where it seems so simple that it should just trickle down. Right. That doesn't happen necessarily very well. And if you think about the change management cycle, the senior leaders have made a change in their minds. They're moving off. They're down the road. And by the time the information gets back to the parts and the service guys, they're like, what are you doing? what have you done? And we need to get better at communicating the whys. Mm-hmm. And really, when it comes to talking about, we can say, yeah, we're making a change, and we think we've communicated a change, but we have to get really a lot better at communicating why are we doing this, what's the benefit, what's the with them, right?
Yeah, we
What's the
just
thing?
had, just to add to that, we just had we have co-CEOs who went out to the locations just a couple of weeks ago and met with every single employee, did sort of like a little town hall, right? Where, okay, here's how the year went, and here's our goals for the coming year. And that's a different message too when it comes from that senior place, as you know, it's not that it's any better, but it just comes, it hits different, right? When it's from that level. And I think our employees who don't always see that level of leadership when, you know, they're in front of them and they're saying, yeah, like thanks for all you did this past year. And, you know, we're really going after it this year and here's why and and you know, you see that.
And that they cared enough
Exactly.
to come out, to take their time to come out to the location.
100%, yeah. Anything?
Again, one of the survey feedbacks that we received is, you know, we'll go to one of our locations, our leadership team will go in, we'll fly in, we'll have our, you know, we run into the location, we run to our meeting, we're stuck in that room for a couple hours, and then we're just as fast going back out the door. So really trying to spend more time at that location. So if you go to a location, making it, you know, an effort to say, okay, we're here, you know, let's do lunch today, let's grill out, all of our locations have a grill, let's, you know, have our leaders that are there for that meeting, let's have them throw some burgers on the grill. Really connect with those employees while they're there instead of just kind of running in and running out. Because they want to see us there, they want to be able to interact and communicate with us and have those conversations about the why and, you know, hey, we implemented this, what do you guys think about that? And really getting some true feedback one-on-one to know that we are listening to the survey feedback. Because that's one thing that when I joined the organization, I heard a lot, hey, we give a ton of feedback, but you don't listen. And so for you to go back out and reinforce that our leaders actually are looking at those survey results, and let's talk about some of that exact feedback that those employees are getting, and let me have some real one-on-one time with you to reinforce what you guys have shared in that survey, and making changes of, you know, not flying in and flying out of a location and really spending some quality time getting to know our employees at those locations.
Well, and
Hot button.
to piggyback on that, I think it's so important that, you know, you say you heard it.
Yeah.
And then you go back to the employees and say, we heard it. And okay, we're telling you that we heard it and this is what we're doing. And really point them to show them.
Yes.
Because I don't think they always make the connection that you're making changes because of the feedback that you've received. I think sometimes that they just see, okay, they're making changes. So just being very conscious and very
Forward.
forward, being very transparent about this is why we are making these changes because we heard you and this is why we're now doing this. So that it's very clear to the employee that we heard.
Fantastic. One topic, maybe not our always favorite topic to discuss, but compensation. So as things have changed a lot too recently when it comes to compensation, do you do anything to sort of determine that, you know, you're providing fair and equitable compensation that's sort of competitive in today's marketplace?
I'm going to that session tomorrow.
Let me answer that tomorrow.
So compensation is a hot button within our organization, and obviously staying competitive in the marketplace with what we're all experiencing, trying to attract and retain our talent. We don't have a specific compensation structure in place. It is a priority of mine to be able to implement that. So I'm hoping to learn a lot tomorrow. But just doing a lot of analysis on our own internal data. Like a lot of you, we've gone through a lot of acquisitions and acquired a lot of just some funky, you know, compensation strategies, those types of things, trying to drive that consistency across the organization. And again, that transparency of why. And having those open communications, because as we all know, compensation is a very sensitive topic for our employees and our managers. So It is a priority of ours, and as many of you probably have that same priority, and if anybody's mastered it, please find me after this.
Yeah.
Because I would love to learn what you've implemented, so.
We have like structured pay and like wage and salary grids and scales. Parts, for example, if you are a level 1 parts person, your range would be this to this. If you're level 2, you're this to this, and so on. But we felt like we were lagging a little bit in the last couple of years, and we actually hired a third-party compensation analyst. We felt it needed to be someone outside of the organization that could come in unbiased and say, you guys are way off, and here's why. And he had access to a lot of surveys and so forth that he had subscriptions to, which we wouldn't have been able to access. We had our own, just from the connections that within HR and the ag industry, but he was able to really dig in for us, and there were some things we learned that were like, okay, we need to do something about this, and we adjusted accordingly, and some people got some big increases last year because we just had to catch them up, and then it just kind of rolls over each year. Okay, so this year, you know, whatever that looks like, you're giving a percentage. Everybody's scale kind of bumps along. It's not perfect. You know, there's one-offs that you have to adjust for and consider, but it's getting there. We're continually some focus on that and looking at that. So
Good. And did you want to add anything? Or you
No,
good?
no,
Oh, good. So one of the other things that we see oftentimes in the employee feedback is that, you know, in order for them to really stay engaged and feel that they're able to produce what they're supposed to do and that they're doing a good job, is that they have the tools and resources that they need. And that's something that requires a lot of investment, maybe on the dealership or even on the employee themselves sometimes, right? When you look at technicians. Is there anything that you've done to sort of measure that and ensure that they have what they need from a tools and resource standpoint?
Nothing formal.
Nothing formal?
No.
Yeah, okay.
No.
You gave me an action item.
I'm gonna give the panel something to walk away with that they need to focus in on. That's okay. Okay, good. Well, it's something that we do, like we ask, you know, to make sure that they feel like they have, you know, the tools and resources that are necessary to do their job well. And I mean, it's something when they're being measured on from a performance basis.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna just pull from previous experience, not in my current role, but that question has always baffled me, because it all depends on the person who's answering it, right? Because for me, I describe myself as simple and shallow. I'm very transparent. You know what I'm thinking, it comes out. So when somebody asks me, do you have the tools and resources to do your job? I'm like, I got a phone, I got a computer. Yeah, I got what I need to do my job. It doesn't go any deeper to that than that for me. But then I would get in conversations with coworkers on that very same question, and they would be like, well, no, we need a report on this, and we need data about that, and we need, I'm like, I never even thought of that. Which brings me to the question of, you know, a lot of the time, the data that you get, and the power of the engagement survey really is in the conversations that come afterward, not in the actual numbers that are generated from the survey. It's really in the going back and asking employees, what did you mean by this? How does that, you know, how does that impact you? What could we do? And just being very open to asking how they actually interpreted the question. I think that was so very eye-opening to me, because like I said, I'm pretty black and white, so.
Yeah, you think of the obvious things, right? Like the tools for technicians to do the
Right.
job, but it may
Right.
be, you know, education, it may be deeper resources, just being able to access that report or information that somebody else may have, but they don't have, and
Right.
and that makes it difficult for them to do their job on a daily basis. Yeah. We've got so many questions here, but I want to be cognizant of time too. So sometimes we come across issues, keeping things sort of fair and equitable between employees, kind of keeping compensation aside. Is there any policies or practices that you've sort of implemented to ensure that in the workplace?
we have a code of conduct that was actually created by our employees. I'm sure many of you have one. It was, it was actually before my time, so it's been more than 10 years that this has kind of been around. But we reached out to the employees and said, hey, like, what kind of environment do you want to work in? Sounds simple, but well, I want it to be positive. I want to be able to work cooperatively with my team. I want to work with a good teammate. Positive attitude, and all that. Those themes were collected, and our code of conduct was created based on those themes. And it has been a tool that we have used in performance management. So, if I have a leader that calls me and says, oh, I got, so-and-so, they're so ignorant and, with, their coworker, and I see that coming out in customers and blah, 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 whatever the scenario is. One of the first things I will say is, have you reviewed the code of conduct with them? Oh, no, haven't. But hey, let's pull that up together. So they'll pull the code of conduct up and they'll say, oh yeah, you're right. Like this box is not checked, this one isn't checked. And what we've ended up doing is the manager will print the code of conduct and we'll sit down with the employee and say, hey, like, let's review this together. And these are some things I'm seeing here. You're not abiding by our code of conduct. And then when we do our performance reviews every year, the last page on the signature page, the code of conduct is printed there. And underneath the signature, it says, I agree to, live by, if you will, the code of conduct of Premier Equipment. And it's been a tool that I think we share at our orientation, and it's a tool that we are that's not the right word, but we are continuing to really bring out, and I find that it's simple, and employees look at it and say, yeah, like I want to work in a positive place. Of course I do. It's simple, right? Everybody does. But when you break it down for them like that, it kind of hits home a little more. This is what we want, guys. This is how we want to behave in the workplace.
And it makes it easier to manage performance then.
100%
Now you've got some very specific
and it
items.
makes the leader can look at that and say, oh yeah, like this, they're not doing any of this. I'm like, okay, well, there's your starting point. Let's print off that and start there. And usually it.
Do you talk with that attitude too?
I do.
Okay,
yes.
good. Me too.
It's just been a good little tool, and again, it's simple, right? But it's certainly resonated for sure.
Good. You're good. Good. Well, thank you, Tracy. We talked a little bit at the very beginning. It came out, I think, Tracy, in your response when we were talking about feeling appreciated at work. You mentioned some of the recognition that you've done for staff. So a lot of times, is there any sort of incentive programs or reward recognition programs you've done to help employees stay engaged and retain those employees throughout their experience in the dealership?
We used to have a program called Best in Canada. We stopped doing that. I think that's why you're asking me that question.
Yep.
You remember that? And we had a customer experience manager who always shared our Best in Canadas with Ryan and the rest of the Satisfied team. And it was just it's basically a recognition program. If you saw someone doing something, that was cool, or going above and beyond, they would submit in a nomination. We had a selection committee who would pick which Best in Canada would win for the month. And at the end of the year, we had 12 Best in Canadas for each month. And one person was selected, and they received a $2,000 travel voucher and a week off of pay. And they were considered the best in Canada. We did that for a long time, I think, 8 or 9, maybe even as long as I've been here, 10 years. We did it shortly after I started. And we felt that it had its day, and we packed it away for a little while, and then we implemented this new system I mentioned where, we we put good news and bad news and announcements into these folders, and our leaders have been going out recognizing or sharing and getting in conversations that way. But that was one kind of a fun little program. It was a hoot while we did it. We'd always surprise the whoever won for that month. We'd go out with silly string and balloons, and they didn't know we were coming, except for the leader, and it was a big thing. And we had a lot of fun with it, but like things, all good things, sometimes they had their day, so we put it away for a little while, but yeah.
We have about the same program. Ours is Deeds Make a Difference. So same thing, monthly, somebody who goes above and beyond, giving them that appreciation. Similarly, we're about ready to sunset that, I believe, because it's had its day.
It has its day. Yeah.
And so the number of nominations that come in, when they start to dwindle, then you know that it's kind of past due. So I think we're going to contemplate the dealer rewards program.
We are.
So we're going to go on there and which allows, if you aren't familiar with it, they have like employee e-cards that they can send each other, and they have the employee of the month. You can celebrate birthdays. You can acknowledge all of the different life events and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of excited about that opportunity to really kind of personalize it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, we're considering that program as well, and I think with the social media piece of it, that with 21 locations, that everybody can get on to that and see who's gotten recognized for different types of things, is a better communication tool for us in this stage and where we're at. So
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that things need to continue to evolve.
Yeah.
So a lot of what you do today is always changing. Like we talk about employee engagement, and their expectations around the experience are always changing, and so your job is never done. But same holds true, right, with retention. I think I was talking to Farah before this conversation, before we sat down, about measuring retention, and there really is no quick fix. That it's something that's always going to continue to go on. And something that we need to continue working at, and sort of, I think, always reevaluating and revamping things and looking what's new out there, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this panel together, is for you to hear what other dealers have done and tried doing. So I think kind of maybe this isn't a bad time to kind of wrap up things, but as we look at the going forward, I appreciate everyone taking their time to share their thoughts and conversations with you. We appreciate the partnership and working with each one of these dealerships that are here today. I did want to open up too for questions. So if anyone has any questions, and I'll preface it with saying that if for some reason Anne or Tracy or Farah doesn't want to answer these questions for us, feel free to decline or take them off privately, right? It may be something that they want to talk about afterwards in private versus in front of the entire group. And same holds true if you have questions for myself, ask those, or you can always come visit. We have a booth on the center aisle, so you can always come visit there as well. But if you have any questions, if you want to raise hands, we'd be glad to answer any questions that the audience might have today.
My question's for you in the sense of the flex scheduling that you've been talking about for the technicians. Is something that we've definitely looked into. The problem that we come running into is that the technicians, they want to give up their customers. They don't, especially our field technicians, they're the ones that are like, that's my person, that's my technician, they're calling each other, and aren't calling the service manager, that kind of thing.
Well, and I'm not handing my tractor off to anybody either. That's mine.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you do in that scenario with the flex schedule?
So the flex schedules are voluntary, and so they're as I can't remember which of you ladies mentioned that we give that as an option for our employees. There are some that want to stick with their normal schedule, and we have a lot of those that are still sticking with, I'm going to do my 8 to 5 Monday through Friday and work my hours on Saturday. So it's a voluntary thing, lots of communication, because we do have those employees that are very dedicated to those specific customers. So it may not always work for them. So, but very good question.
Any other questions?
They're letting us off easy.
I know, I'm really surprised.
I've paid you all very well.
like, you know, like good news, bad news, that type of thing. How do you know if the employee's okay with you sharing that information? Like, do you have a process for that, or?
Yeah, no, great question. No, we don't have a formal process for it. I think our leaders work, I know I do, work very closely with the employee's direct leader or the store manager. We have an employee that comes to mind right off the top of my head who lost a son in the past year and is having a really difficult time. And it was obviously a very delicate, sensitive topic, and one of which you're not going to go in the middle of the shop, right, and say, hey, how you doing, right? So I think there's a little bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, like it's, you know, you kind of have to look at the scenario and say, you know, I may not talk about this topic here and now, right? But maybe it's a topic that, you know, if we're in private, I can bring up. If it's a good news story, most times there's no problem. But we're sensitive to that certainly, and make sure that it's not something that you're really going to, you know, do more harm than good, right? Yeah. So yeah, we're careful with that for sure. Good question.
So when you were talking about, you know, singling out employees and recognizing them in a positive way, did you ever have any problems with the opposite side, from the ones who weren't being recognized, any animosity, and if so, how did you handle it?
That was part of one of the reasons we decided to put it to bed for a little while. In the beginning, I'd say the first many years, it was well received, and I think 99% of the time when that person was recognized, everyone else agreed with it. So that helped, right? Everyone was like, yeah, like she deserved that completely, right? And we did feel it was becoming a little more of a popularity contest kind of thing, which is why we went, okay, it's had its day. But in its glory days, we didn't run into too much of that. It, like I said, it was usually recognized that, yeah, they deserve that. Or we did even have some teams were submitted as well. We had some people, when we would announce a won or congratulations, you've been selected, they would always make a point of saying, I couldn't have done it without my team, right? And that went far. That message was very well received as well. But yeah, there was, obviously it's not perfect. We certainly are not perfect. But it worked when it was in its glory days for sure. One of the reasons why we decided, okay, it's had its time. It started to go, okay, we're getting the same people nominated now. Maybe we just need to put this aside for a little while, right? And that happens, right? If your overachievers are going to be the ones that continually overachieve, and you know, that's okay too, so.
Okay, well, I don't think we have any other questions, but of course, if you have anything that you want to ask directly to any one of the panelists, feel free to do so. I'd like to give a round of applause for our panelists today. I really appreciate the time